Welcome back to episode 9 of the 0 to 3k IO score challenge. If you guys have missed any of the episodes in this series, then there is a card you can click in the top right hand corner that will lead you to a playlist. So if you don't know the rules to this challenge, then be sure to check out episode 1 where I explain it. Also, if you guys enjoyed this video, then I would really appreciate it if you subscribe so you can see more of my content. You can also check out my other socials in the description. Be sure to check out my Twitch, as there is a good chance that the day this video goes up, I will be live at some point during the day, so be sure to come drop in and drop a follow. Let's see what's in our vault. I think I'm gonna go Retribution loot spec because I want a better trinket than this, and we can't get a Rage Heart because I only did LFR. So yeah. We want any myth track tier, a chest piece would be really good, or a better trinket. Oh, interesting. Okay, so we do have myth track leech gloves that I could catalyze. That is pretty good. Or I could take a myth track gore howl for ret for fun after the series is done. I think we're going to go with the myth track leech gloves here since they are going to help us in this episode, and I can catalyze them, and it's still an upgrade for ret too technically. I'll just have to find a different two-handed weapon. I think if this was maybe the weapon from Smolderon, then on the hero track maybe I would take it, but I don't think these stats are very good. For ret, I think you want haste first. So yeah, we're gonna go with these gloves. They do have leech too, which is actually pretty lucky. I mean, I think this character actually has a good amount of tertiaries. Not a ton, but you know, a few. And our key is a plus 23 Black Rook hold, which I don't think we're gonna have to do. Actually, we might. We only have a 20, so actually that is pretty perfect. With our new vault gloves, we headed over to the catalyst to turn them into tier, and then I upgraded them to 489. So we only have about 50 score more to go before we reach our goal. This means that I really have to target specific dungeons to try to get the most out of them as possible without pushing our other keys into levels that probably aren't realistic. With this being the case, I'm going to try to keep doing these same keys until we can have a run with minimal mistakes, which means that we're likely going to deplete a few of them, but as long as we have the right mindset, we can hopefully get the score we need to complete this challenge. The keys that we need to complete are around at least a plus 22 weight crest, a plus 22 throne, a plus 22 or 23 rise, and a plus 22 or 23 black rook hold. The first one that we tried to do was my own key, a plus 22 Crest Manner. The affixes of this week, being Fortified and Ballstarring, are pretty rough in a few dungeons, specifically where mobs either do very high group damage or concentrated damage on a single player that, once bolstered, can usually just one-shot players if people aren't ready for it or you don't stun the mobs. Crest can have a lot of mobs and packs that would fall into this category, since there's a lot of small mobs that can die pretty easily, so if you kill them too fast, it'll bolster the bigger mobs, and those can just one-shot people. As a DPS player, a tip that I can give is to use your spells and abilities to try to priority down these higher HP mobs first. This can really make a difference in your key that almost nobody will notice, but will no doubt increase the likelihood that you can time this key. That's because killing these mobs really helps your group progress the key, and while you will do less overall damage, you will do more impact in your group, since instead of using an AoE spell, if you use your single target spell in, let's say, a pack of 5 mobs, this will kill the mob that is super dangerous to your group that could lead to a single death, and even a wipe, which is obviously a really good thing since it can lead to people getting frustrated, or people just not playing to their best of their ability. So yeah, you really want to make sure you're focusing down the mobs that are most dangerous to your group. Anyways, the first quarter of the key was pretty uneventful, as most of the packs aren't too scary until you get into the courtyard. This is where you can kind of lead into some problems, and we did have a few deaths, but no actual wipes until we reached Rao. We didn't focus on the servant ads enough, so after a few reached the boss, we had a wipe at about 40%, and the same thing pretty much happened again with another wipe at 30%. And yeah, that was basically GG. I think some of the problems was mainly just with our damage and our CC on the ads. But overall, if that wasn't a problem, we probably would have timed this key. So we'll just hopefully get a group with a little bit more damage and some better crowd control, and we should be good to go. That is definitely one of the hard parts of Mythic Plus when you're pugging, is knowing when a key was not able to be completed because it was your fault or because of other people you were playing with. It kind of sucks when I would deem it to be other players, because it can feel kind of helpless and like you're just playing slots to hopefully get into a group with players that will kick and stun and focus down the right mechanics. But at the end of the day, you can play your best and hope for the best, and that's basically all it comes down to. And then all you need to do is have some more practice and some reps until you get a group that will help your group succeed. Anyways, I joined a plus 23 Throne of the Tides. This key has a few really dangerous mobs on bolstering. The Sentinels are really scary for tanks since they use a tank buster, and there's a few pulls where there's 2 of them. So if they hit you with this and then a few melees, you can easily die. So it is really scary. So I changed the first pull here to try not to include them, since I don't have the best faith that my DPS players will focus them down with their single target spells, so that they die before the other mobs and don't get bolstered. Another one that's pretty dangerous for your group is the Ravagers, since they can do a lot of damage when bolstered. One thing that I've learned throughout the series as a tank is to try to keep them in an open area. Hopefully this means that your DPS players will spread out pretty evenly, since the main real scary mechanic is the frontal that they do, which leaves a dot on you, and if it hits multiple players, it can sometimes be a little bit too much for your healer to keep up with. So if your group spreads out, it should ideally only hit one person at a time. We did have a wipe that stemmed from my cheat death being procced by the Sentinels right here, but we probably still had enough time to make it, as we dealt with the first, second, and third boss pretty easily, and then we made our way to the last hallway with about 6 minutes and Lust, which would make it pretty close, but since we could do the last boss super fast, I think it was still timeable. We went into this pull taking lots of group-wide damage from the corruption ads, and they got killed a little bit too fast, which, if you don't know, does group-wide damage. But for some reason, most of our party members were 50% when our healer's health just goes from 50 to 0. I'm wondering if it was probably one of the casts from the goblins that throw the spears. I've noticed on Fortified Week, even as a tank, they hit incredibly hard for some reason. I don't really know why. I was pretty shocked that they just died all of a sudden, but I felt like we at least had a chance to still time this. I was thinking about maybe a B-res or something like that, but they pretty much left pretty fast, so at least we got some practice, so hopefully we'll be able to time this key this week. Something that's pretty common for this challenge is me needing to get used to playing Paladin again. Paladin and tanking is not my main, so it definitely takes a few keys for me to get back into the rhythm and remember what dungeons and what mobs are super difficult. So I think I'm going to adjust my pulls a little bit in this key so that it's a little bit more suitable for my group. Probably do a little bit smaller pulls since bolstering is pretty difficult, and with lots of the spellcasters, if you bolster them and your group doesn't have really good kick management, a lot of people will get kind of their health brought down a little bit and then one more spell and they're dead. So I think I'm going to adjust my pulls to be a little bit smaller, and hopefully that will help alleviate some of the deaths that we had earlier on in this dungeon. I managed to get into another Crest Manner, but honestly there wasn't too much to say about this run. To sum it up, we had a few deaths with the Heartsbane Triad, then we pulled some mobs until we got our Lust for the Soulbound Goliath. A few deaths here when we pulled a bit more than intended. I'm not sure how this pack got pulled, if it was on purpose or not, since my camera was facing the other way because I was watching out for the mobs on the other side, but our Warlock and Healer got meleeed, which led to everyone but me dying. Looking back, I definitely should have kept the Matron close to the stairs that we came down, or even gone further down the stairs, so that it was kind of gonna avoid one of the flaws of Waycrest, which is that it can be extremely cramped. So I think that is something I would change for next time, since I don't think I actually needed that other pack, but I did want to kill the matron all by herself since she can be pretty dangerous. We made our way downstairs, then we actually had another wipe to the witches because they require a lot of kicks and stops to safely control them, and they do a lot of volleys that can hit your entire group. So I tried my best to kick and interrupt as many as I could, but there was a lot and our healer wasn't able to keep up. They also got pretty unlucky with getting targeted by a lot of spells. Luckily, the timer in here is actually pretty forgiving and it's quite long, so we still did time it with about 2.5 minutes to spare, which gave us plus 10 score and a pair of boots. I joined a plus 22 throne that, like the Waycrest, was a pretty clean run. We didn't have the same wipes from the previous run, and everyone seemed to be having a pretty good time as we were all chatting and joking around with each other. Our kicks were a lot better, and our warrior had the legendary, so he of course did tons of damage. The final hallway was a lot smoother than the last one, and we once again had lust available, so the last boss basically stood no chance. We got plus 12 score and a cloak. You guys may be noticing that as the series has gone on with some of these dungeons, there isn't too much to say, as a lot of the times I'm doing these runs, they have the same breakpoints where if the group plays well, the rest of the key is pretty much smooth sailing and there's not much to say. Generally, if you're going to time a key, you're going to be able to see in the first quarter or first half of the dungeon how it's going to go, and you can usually get a pretty good idea of the kind of players you're playing with even in the first pull. So it is definitely something where you kind of need to trial and error and see where those breakpoints are and where you can actually influence the group as much as possible. A lot of these things are super small that are really hard for me to go over, but it is definitely something where I've improved so much in this series, it's crazy. I joined a plus 23 rise, which was higher than I had originally planned for this week, but surprisingly, although it was a pretty hard dungeon, we still came out of it successful. You do have to be careful with the early pulls, since the mobs required to spawn tier are quite dangerous and have a lot of health, so they will almost certainly be bolstered before they die. I did alright with my pulls in the next room where the portals are, and then we made our way to Battlefield and eventually lusted more chi. Something I want to point out is this pack right here before the last boss, as it posed a question for me as to whether or not it was worth it to invest my cooldowns to avoid my own deaths, since we had already had a lot of deaths from the AoE abilities. So it had already procced my cheat death, so by the time that we made it to the boss, I had chosen to invest my cooldowns on those mobs, since wiping there would have been really bad. So I didn't have what I needed to live for the boss, which caused a wipe. And I didn't make it more than 30 seconds since a few of my really strong cooldowns were down. Now, I did still have a few cooldowns, but since I knew I was so limited on cooldowns, I really did want to save them for further on into the fight, since this boss has lots of frontals that do lots of damage. This is something I've noticed with Prop Paladin, is you do have a lot of cooldowns available to you, and if you cycle them well, you can basically live. But if there is prolonged pulls, like mobs that are fortified and even bolstered, especially ones that do lots of damage to you with frontals and things like that, you can often run out of cooldowns, and if the next pull is also really hard, you can be kind of screwed sometimes. Luckily, the second time around with more cooldowns ready, we just barely managed to kill the boss with about 30 seconds to spare. I'm really glad we managed to get this done, since it gave us 19 score, meaning that we only need 2 score to reach our goal. 2 score to complete our challenge of getting to 3k score. Now, does that mean that last 2 score will be easy? No, of course not. It wouldn't be this challenge if we didn't have a few depletes first. The first key hurt, because this should have been where the challenge ended, and it was definitely my fault. As I have mentioned before in this series, sometimes I have internet issues that I can't really control, and it leads to disconnects. But my internet sometimes likes to go out for about 5 to 10 minutes at a time, and I'm often up pretty late filming these videos, and that is usually when it is a lot more likely that I will disconnect. It really does suck because I feel bad for the leader of the group that has their key depleted and everyone that invested the time of doing most of the dungeon before my disconnect happens. And it is also something that if you guys have ever tried to troubleshoot internet problems, it can be really hard because there's a million different things that can cause it. I am supposed to get new internet soon, so I don't really think I'm gonna look too much longer into troubleshooting it. It is definitely frustrating, but hopefully when I get new internet, which is supposed to be in a few months, hopefully, I'm hoping it won't be the same kind of problems. If you're wondering why not do these keys another day, I actually had to get them done before the reset at 9 a.m. that day, so I didn't really have much of a choice. We did have a lot of deaths early on in the dungeon, there's no question about that. Mostly from the room with scouts that use knife dance, which is often a problem in pugs since you really do need to CC them as much as possible. But somehow our group stayed together, but I knew that one small push would likely lead to the end, which happened after we killed Smashbite. I got disconnected for about 2 minutes or so, and when I got back in as fast as I could, most of the group had already left. I'm assuming they probably thought it was a power outage or a rage quit, but yeah, pretty unfortunate. I'm sorry to the guys in this group, but it is what it is. We got to move on to our next key. We had to go again on a plus 21, but this group had a lot more mistakes than the last one. For example, on the first boss, we had way too little damage and CC on the souls that go towards the boss, so we ended with 5 stacks, which only me and the paladin managed to survive, which wasted a lot of time, obviously. After another wipe, we went up the stairs and our warlock went AFK, then logged off or DC'd. I'm not sure which one, but at that point it was GG. Either way, at this point in the night, I was extremely tired and was making lots of silly mistakes, but I knew if I wanted to complete this challenge this week, I had to get back in there. I joined a plus 23 Blackrock hold, and while the deaths were still pretty high from the knife dance and a few other ads, we did manage to persevere towards our goal. After 9 episodes, we have completed our final goal of this challenge, and I'm very proud to say that I took a fresh level 70 paladin from 0 to 3k Raider.io score. I want to thank you guys very much for all the support on this series. We've gotten so many new people in our community that have subscribed and have told me that they have enjoyed this series. I hope it has helped some of you in your own pugging experience, as I do try my best to not only provide entertaining content, but I also want to give you guys tips to make your goals in WoW more achievable. I've played this game for a really long time, and I know that it can be incredibly fun, so I'm just trying to make that experience a lot more fun for you guys, so hopefully you can get the same enjoyment from this game that I do. If there's any content that you guys want to see from me, other than pugging challenges, be sure to let me know in the comments. I am totally open for suggestions, because at this point, I'm not really too sure where to go. But I do want to make some more content so that I can hopefully help you guys out and keep you guys entertained. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time.